Hi, this is Ryder Keeping It Real, and we're doing scripture readings. And I want to tell you that since I started doing this, I've come to realize, and I knew this, but now I really know this, is that anybody who's putting videos online on YouTube, they are taking a lot of time to do that. Not only to record it, let alone I'm not editing, so they're editing and then uploading, I'm looking at a video that I'm uploading for First Maccabees Chapter 7, 8, and part of 9. 1 hour, 51 minutes to upload the video. Crazy. So just know that it's something that you either love to do or you're compelled to do. And right now I'm at a point of I feel compelled to do this, and then as I start to do it, I love it. As I get into it, I love it. So we are we are reading through the Good News Bible with the Apocrypha, easy reader. But you can go out and you can buy the Apocrypha that looks like this. You can get it on Amazon. It's a tiny little book. I mean, really tiny, tiny book, right? You can get that. And it's not hard to read, but I like this one because it has pictures. And as you can see, some of these pictures I've colored, some I haven't colored, but I'm probably going to color as I go, right? Because I like drawing, coloring. So here we go, guys. And I don't know if anybody's listening to me. I'm just listening to myself. That's the way it feels like, but that's cool too. So we're on chapter 9 of First Maccabees, and we've already read the death of Judas. And Judas was one of the brothers, one of the Maccabee brothers, and he was super bad, man. I mean, he ran the show, and now he has died, and his other brother has taken over, named Jonathan. So Jonathan succeeds Judas. So after the death of Judas, the lawless traitors began to reappear everywhere in Judea, and all of the wicked men returned. Also, at the time, there was a severe famine, and the whole country went over to the side of the renegades. Oh, man. Check that out. I mean, I think that when I'm reading this, I think this happened in the past, but it's going to happen again. You're going to have traitors, you're going to have the renegades who are not going to, stay the course. So let's see what happens here. Hold on. And for those, I don't pronounce all the words right. It just is what it is. Um, Bakahids deliberately appointed some renegade Jews as rulers over the country. These men hunted down the friends of Judas and brought them all before Baki, and he subjected them to torture and humiliation. It was a time of great trouble for Israel, worse than anything that had happened to them since the time prophets ceased to appear among them. Oh, so there was a time that prophets stopped appearing to tell them what was going to happen. So then all the friends of Judas came together and said to Jonathan, "Since your brother Judas died, there has been no one like him to lead us against our enemies, against Bakites and those of our own nation who oppose us. So today we choose you to succeed him as our ruler and commander to carry on our war." So they hadn't, until when Judas died, they didn't have anyone to lead them. That was a part of the problem. So Jonathan accepted the leadership that day and took the place of his brother Judas. The picture. They kept watch and saw a noisy crowd loaded down with baggage. Okay. The campaign of Jonathan. Campaign of Jonathan's. When Bach-Heath learned of this, he made up his mind to kill Jonathan. But when this news reached Jonathan, he fled with his brother Simon and their men to the wilderness of Tikio, and set up camp at the pool of Asbar. Bach-Heath learned about this on the Sabbath and crossed the Jordan with his whole army. I wonder why that's in parentheses like that. 34. First Maccabees, 34. Maccabees 9:34. not in parentheses here. I wonder why it's in parentheses there. Which, when Maccabees understood, he came near to Jordan and all of his host upon the Sabbath day. Learned of this, he crossed the Sabbath. Yeah, okay. Jonathan sent his brother John. So Jonathan has a brother named John, who was responsible for the soldiers' families, to ask the Nabateans, with whom he was on friendly terms, for permission to store with them the large amount of baggage they had. Okay. But the Jamorites of Medebia attacked John, took him captive, and carried off all the baggage. So they stole the baggage. Sometime later, Jonathan and his brother Simon learned that the Jamorites were about to celebrate an important wedding and that there would be a bridal procession from the town of. Sorry, guys, hold on a second. I just fell down. Okay. Sometime later, Jonathan and his brother Simon learned that the Jamorites were about to celebrate an important wedding and that there would be a bridal procession from the town of Nadabath. The bride was the daughter of one of the great princes of Canaan. Jonathan and Simon had wanted revenge for the death of their brother John. Did they kill John? But the Jamorites had been attacked John, took him captive. They must have killed John. Wanted the death of their brother John. So they and their men went up on one of the mountains and hid. This is them hiding on the mountains. They kept watch and saw a noisy crowd loaded down with baggage. The bridegroom, his friends, and his relatives were all on their way to meet the bride's party. They were heavily armed and were playing musical instruments and drums. Okay, that's the musical instruments and drums. The Jews attacked from their ambush and killed many of them. The rest escaped into the mountains while the Jews carried off all their possessions. This is like a repeat. You have a war, there's some musical instruments involved, you take the loot. So the wedding was turned into a time of mourning and their joyful music into funeral songs. Jonathan and Simon had taken full revenge for the death of their brother, and they returned to the marshes along the Jordan. Maccabees heard about this and arrived on the Sabbath at the banks of the Jordan with a large army. Jonathan said to his men, "Now we must fight for our lives." We must fight for our lives. I wonder one day if we will have to fight for our lives. We must fight for our lives. We are in a worse situation than we have ever been in before. The enemy is in front of us, the river is behind us, and the marshes and the thickets are all on both sides of us. There is no way out. So pray now for the Lord to save us from our enemies. The battle began, and Jonathan and his men were just about to kill Maccabees, and he escaped to the rear of the army. So he went back to the rear of his army. So Jonathan and his men jumped into the Jordan, into the river, and swam to the other side to escape, and the Syrian army did not cross the river to follow them. That day, Maccabees lost about 1,000 men. After Maccabees returned to Jerusalem, the Syrians built fortitudes with high walls and barred gates for a number of towns in Judea. And then those are all the towns, listing all the towns. In all of these, he placed troops to harass the Jews. He also strengthened the fortifications. See, they're not called Jews, they're called Jews here, right? Also, he strengthened the fortification of the towns of Batzar and Gezar and of the fort in Jerusalem. He placed army units in them and stored up supplies there. Then he took the sons of the leading men of the country as hostages and imprisoned them in the fort. I'm trying to just visualize this happening. And it's hard when you've never been to war, or you don't really, you just don't know about war. You just hear about it on TV, but you really, I don't want to be in a war, but it's hard for me to visualize it. So in the second month of the year 153, the high priest Alchemist, he's still around, ordered that the wall of the inner court of the temple be torn down. So the wall of the inner court. So there's walls of the outer court, walls of the inner court be torn down. This would have destroyed what the prophets had accomplished. But just as the work began, he had a stroke. I had a stroke? Did they say a stroke? 54 is a stroke. What on earth? I mean, from the Senate to, wait a minute. Hold on. Maccabees 9, what? $55. Maccabees 9:55. 9:55. And as he began to pull down, even at this time when Alchemist's plague and his enterprises hindered, for his mouth was stopped and he was taken with a palsy, so that he could no longer speak or anything, nor give orders. So palsy was here, and they say stroke in this newer version. I knew that wasn't a word back then. I knew they weren't using that back then. He had a stroke, and work was stopped. Paralyzed and unable to open his mouth, he could not speak or even make a will for his family. He died in great torment. When Bacchides learned that Alchemist was dead, he returned to King Demetrius, and the land of Judea had peace for 2 years. That's good. Then all the renegades got together and said, "Look, Jonathan and his men are living in peace and security. If we bring Bacchides here now, he can capture them all in a single night." They went to discuss the matter with Bacchides, and he set out with his large army. He sent secret letters to all the allies in Judea, asking them to seize Jonathan and his men. I mean, why don't they give it up? This is so crazy. But they were not able to do so because the plot was discovered. Jonathan and his men captured 50 of the treacherous leaders who had been involved in the plot and put them to death. Then Jonathan, Simon, and the forces withdrew from Bethsbazi in the wilderness. They rebuilt the fallen fortifications and strengthened the town's defenses. Kind of like building a wall, right? They built a wall so people couldn't get in. That's not building a wall isn't anything new. When Bacchides learned about all this, he got his whole army together and alerted his supporters in Judea. He attacked Bethsbazi from all sides and built siege platforms. After the battle had gone for a long time, Jonathan slipped out into the country with his small body of men and left his brother Simon in charge of the town. Okay? Jonathan defeated Odomeria and his people, and they attacked and destroyed the Persaritic camp. Once defeated, they joined Jonathan and advanced with him in his attack against Bacchides. At the same time, Simon and his men rushed from the town and burned the siege platforms. In the battle, Bacchides was pressed so hard that all of his plans came to nothing, and he was defeated. He was so furious with the treacherous Jews who had urged him to come to Judea that he put many of them to death. Then Bacchides decided to return to his own country. But when Jonathan learned of this, he sent ambassadors to Bacchides to arrange for peace terms. They really want peace and the return of the Jewish prisoners. Bacchides agreed to do as Jonathan asked and gave him his solemn promise that he would let him live in peace and the rest of his life. What happened here? Then Bacchides decided to return to his own country. Okay, but when Jonathan heard of this, he sent ambassadors to Bacchides to arrange for peace terms and the return of the Jewish prisoners. Okay, Bacchides agreed to do as Jonathan asked and gave him his solemn promise that he would let him live in peace the rest of his life. I wonder if that's true. Bacchides handed over the prisoners and returned to his own country. Never again did he come into Jewish territory. Interesting. War came to an end in Jerusalem. Jonathan settled in Michmash and began to govern the people and to eliminate the renegade Jews from Israel. Interesting. So Jonathan is kind of taken over from his brother Judas. There was a period of time where nobody was in charge, and a bunch of the Jews became like traitors. Um, so I guess he's kind of found his place in the family. Took him some time, but he did. I don't know. I don't know. I guess reading this to me is like, first you got to make yourself believe it's true that it happened. First you got to go there. Then you got to try to understand what's happening and what it means. And that's the hard part. Like, that's kind of the hard part. What does all this mean? What does it mean now? How does what happened then affect now? It's kind of what is in my head. And why did they take this book out of the Bible? Well, first of all, because these Maccabees kept winning, right? So if you don't want people to know that you can call on God, the real God, the Elohim, and he will, or she will, or it will come and help you and fight for you and help you to win, even though you don't have, all of the weaponry that maybe your enemy has, or as many, many men, you wouldn't want people to know that. So I get it. I definitely get it. That's part of it. That's definitely part of it. That's definitely part of it. But I see why people don't read the Bible. I mean, it's like, because you got to make relevance of it. And they made it so you don't want it to be relevant, but it is. So we got to figure out how it's relevant. So we want to read it and see what we can learn from it, you know? I don't think I've ever colored and did it on video. I don't know. Now, this is interesting. He has on a skirt. He has on pants. Of course, I'm going to make them brown, as I think they were. And it looks different when they become brown. It's a whole different look, right? It's a whole different look. So, I'm probably not going to cover all the little intricate details of that. I don't know. This is an interesting story, though. It's an interesting story to read. Yeah, I don't know. I do feel like coloring it. I mean, so while I'm coloring, you could go and you could find your Apocrypha and be reading it. It just is a challenge. It's a challenge we need to take because we know that time is winding up. We know that things are changing. We know that things aren't ever going back to the way they were. So what's coming next is something we've never seen before. So what is it? Is it more of what's happening here, like the past? Like call on God and he will help you, he will save you? You never know. But if it is, that'd be great. You know what that is? So these are all the people with all of the stuff. You're ready to go to a wedding. They think they're going to be happy. Like we could be sitting here thinking we're going to be happy. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. You're going to do nothing. Don't know what you're going to do. I mean, those that have lived long enough understand that. Think you can plan your life. My mother used to say, you can't run God's program. You can do all the planning you want, but that don't mean that's what's going to happen. I don't mean that at all. Probably these people right here were like the leaders. Purple on. There were women here. Always with the horns. I'm telling you, have a shofar. I think I'm going to learn how to blow it. I think I'm going to need to. It's very important. Keeps coming up in all these stories. And they're singing and dancing and having a good time. So they kept watch and saw a noisy crowd loaded down with baggage. So we need to keep watch. See what is happening. Not what they tell us is happening. What do we see happening? How do we relate to what's happening in the world? So that is the end of First Maccabees Chapter 9. Judas has died. Jonathan, there was a break in leadership. Jonathan succeeds Judas. And then Judas has a lot of campaigns where he's dealing with some renegade people, renegade Jews. He wins some battles and has a peace deal with his enemies. And then he's at peace for a while. So, signing off for now. Till the next time.